Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my top 30 ranked running backs for week number 9 and my tiers for week number 9 at the running back position. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And if you have any questions about week number 9, never hesitate to ask down below in the comment section or ask in our Discord. That is free, linked in the video description and in the pinned comment. We're going to talk about our sponsor DraftKings later. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 9 running back rankings and tiers. We begin with tier number 1 at the running back position. All 5 of these running backs are must starts on the week. At number 1, we have Austin Ekeler going up against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. 4 weeks in a row for Austin Ekeler inside of the top 3 at the running back position, and he currently ranks as the running back number 2 in half PPR. This matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons is straight up amazing. Without Mike Williams and most likely without Keenan Allen, Austin Ekeler should absolutely devour the Atlanta Falcons defense. At number 2, we have Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City on Sunday Night Football. Now, the matchup for me never ends up mattering for Derrick Henry. As it gets colder and colder outside, defenses find it very difficult to tackle Derrick Henry, even though I do think that the Kansas City Chiefs are ultimately going to beat the ever-living dog shit out of the Tennessee Titans in this spot. I still do think Derrick Henry will get it done. He's currently the running back number 5 in half PPR, and I expect a top 5 performance out of him in this matchup. At number 3, we have Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. Now, Josh Jacobs was on a roll from weeks 4 through 7, finishing as the RB1. 3, then he had a bye week, then he was the running back number 1. Last week up against the Saints, the Las Vegas Raiders fucking crumbled completely. Josh Jacobs was the RB42 in that game, having 10 carries for 43 rushing yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 11 receiving yards, and 6 half PPR points. But at the end of the day, one bad game out of the Raiders, one bad game out of Josh Jacobs is not going to make me panic. This week, they get the Jacksonville Jaguars, whose defense looked really good to start the season, but as of recently, they've definitely collapsed, just like Josh Jacobs' team did last week. But I fully expect the Las Vegas Raiders to hop back on the saddle and Josh Jacobs to have a great performance this week as my running back number 3. At number 4, we have Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Baltimore Ravens at home in New Orleans for Monday Night Football. 4 games in a row inside of the top 20 for Alvin Kamara, and he was the running back number 1 last week up against the Raiders. 18 carries for 62 rushing yards, 10 targets, 9 receptions, 96 receiving yards, not 1, not 2, but 3 fucking touchdowns in that game, 38 fantasy points, and he was the number 1 running back at the end of the week. 3 games in a row with 9 or more targets. Alvin Kamara is clearly fitting this role perfectly in New Orleans. Michael Thomas is out for the rest of the season because his toe hurts. Jarvis Landry, I don't think is going to play. They don't really have a bunch of options to throw the ball to. There's not a plethora of players to give the rock to, so I think Alvin Kamara sees a healthy dosage of targets yet again. At number 5, to close out tier number 1, we have Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. 2 games in a row inside of the top 10 for Travis Etienne, who is currently the running back 19 in half PPR. Once they got rid of James Robinson, the writing was on the wall that Travis Etienne needs to get some respect thrown on his name, and this guy needs to be a top 10 running back every single week in my rankings. Last week, he performed well up against an incredibly tough defense in the Denver Broncos in London with 24 carries, which I will note was his most on the year by 10. His second most was 14 in week 7. He got 10 more carries, 24 carries, 156 rushing yards, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 6 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 24 fantasy points, and he was the running back number 7 this week up against the Raiders defense that just got a train ran on them by Alvin Kamara. I love Travis Etienne. It is Ass Etienne season, ass-eaten season in Jacksonville. Next up, we move to tier number 2, running back 6 through 10. All of these guys are also must starts. They're just kind of on a lower clip, in my opinion. So Aaron Jones going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. This is obviously a mouth-watering matchup. The reason why he is not in tier number 1 and he's in tier number 2 is because the fact that A.J. Dillon is still there, and I do trust him now. I do finally trust Aaron Jones. Back-to-back games inside the top 12. Week 7 against the Commanders, RB4. Last week, running back number 11. So I trust Aaron Jones, but I do know in the back of my head, deep down, that there's still a chance that A.J. Dillon sees a bunch of work and Aaron Jones gets derailed by that. But still, Aaron Jones has looked incredible over the last 2 games. I think LaFleur, head coach of the team, finally figured out that, hey, if we jam the ball down the throat of the defense with Aaron Jones, that works. So hopefully he continues that trend up against a piss-poor Lions defense. At number 7, we have KW the third, Kenneth Walker the third of the Seattle Seahawks, going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. Ever since Kenneth Walker took over as the lead back when Rashad Penny ended up getting hurt, Kenneth Walker has been dominant. Though I will note last week was his worst game by far on the year, but he still scored a touchdown, and every single game he's been a starter, he's scored at least 1 touchdown. 18 carries up against the Giants, 51 rushing yards, 2 targets, 1 reception, 1 receiving yard, 1 touchdown, 12 fantasy points, RB number 24. Now, again, when I say that was his worst game, I'm not trying to shit down the throat of Kenneth Walker, right? Kenneth Walker has been simply incredible when he is the starting running back on the team. They get the Cardinals defense in Arizona, who hasn't been the best. Last time these two teams played, it was an incredibly low-scoring game, but even with it being lower scoring up against the Cardinals, Kenneth Walker still was the running back 8 on the week, scoring 18 fantasy points, so I'm extremely comfortable with him at this point. Just like with Travis Etienne, these are guys that need to be ranked inside of the top 10. At number 8, we have Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Commanders in Washington. To start off the season, Dalvin Cook was on a fucking rocky road, a roller coaster ride. RB 20, 44, 14, 27. But over the last 3 games and the last technical 4 weeks, because he was on a bye, in week 7, in week 5 up against the Bears, RB 7. In week 6 up against the Dolphins in Miami, RB 13. Then he had a bye week. Then he was RB 8 up against the Arizona Cardinals. We need to start believing more in Dalvin Cook, because after those first couple of weeks, I felt like I was getting absolutely raw dogged by the fact that I kept telling you guys to start Dalvin Cook. But now we are in week number 9, and I feel extremely comfortable having him in my lineup. Next up, we move to running back number 9, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots, going up against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts defense has looked definitely better compared to the start of the season, but Ramondre Stevenson has been a top 14 running back in 4 of the last 4 games, 4 for 4, like he was at Wendy's. Running back 14, 2, 6, and 10. Damian Harris is back, but it does really appear that Bill Belichick and this offense fully trust Ramondre Stevenson to be the guy. When the Zappaneta Bailey Zappi is in, or when Mac Jones is in, Ramondre Stevenson has been eating. I know Damian Harris is going to get some touches. Maybe eventually he does get a more heavy dosage of carries in this offense, but honestly, with how fucking good Ramondre Stevenson has looked at both running the ball in between the tackles, as well as catching passes, 8 targets in week 7. In week 8, 7 targets, and he caught all of those passes. 8 receptions in week 7, 7 receptions in week 8 up against the Jets, up against the Colts. It should be no surprise to see a healthy dosage of Ramondre Stevenson. I think the game plan in this game is to be incredibly run heavy from both the Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts. At number 10, we have Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Carolina Panthers this week at home in Cincinnati. Now, Joe Mixon is a top 10 running back because of the volume. Every single week, this guy is going to see a shit ton of carries, and if he doesn't get a shit ton of carries, he's going to get a bunch of targets. Last week, he only had 8 carries, but he got 9 targets for 7 receptions. Now, we had a down game last week, RB number 27. The whole team up against the Cleveland Browns completely and utterly collapsed on primetime. Joe Shiesty, Joe Burrow had an atrocious game. But at the end of the day, this week they get the Carolina Panthers, who just got carved up Jeffrey Dahmer style by the Atlanta Falcons and Marcus Mariota. I think Joe Mixon is worthy of being a tier 2 running back, but he's kind of on the fringe, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I had some trouble. Do I want to rank him inside tier 2 or tier 3? Ultimately, he made the cut to be RB number 10 in tier number 2. Again, it's all about volume, because this motherfucker only averages 3.3 yards per carry. In tier number 3, we start with Leonard Fournette, Uncle Lenny of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the LA Rams at home in Tampa Bay. Now, despite the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been a complete and utter unmitigated fucking disaster, an absolute dumpster fire all season long, Leonard Fournette has somehow escaped all that bullshit. He is currently the RB number 8 in half PPR, and he was the running back 18 last week up against the Baltimore Ravens. Again, despite the fact that Tom Brady has really been struggling both in football and outside of football because his ass got divorced, I still think Leonard Fournette is going to have a decent game every single week. I mean, based upon the last couple of games, starting in week 4, RB 15, 2, 7. He had a really bad game against the Panthers, RB 48, because the Bucs just shit the bed completely in that game. And then RB 18 last week. He has been reliable, so he earns a spot inside the top 12 and in tier number 3. Tier number 3 is extremely small because after that, I feel like things start to open up a little bit. So next up at number 12 inside of tier number 3, we have DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. Swift was the RB 23 last week. He was incredibly good when healthy to start off the season, RB 3 and RB 4. But Dan Campbell, after the game last week up against the Dolphins, where he was RB number 23, he said that, hey, I think we might have given DeAndre Swift one too many touches. So clearly, they still believe that he is hurt, and clearly we are still going to be seeing a bunch of Jamal Williams potentially. But at the end of the day, up against the Packers in a game where you're going to have to throw the ball a shit ton if you want to keep up, I think DeAndre Swift will still be very involved. I might be eating my words on this one. This might end up being an awful take, but I still am extremely confident in DeAndre Swift. Now we move into tier number 4 at the running back position. But before we do that, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at DraftKings. They've been on your screen this whole entire video right below me. DraftKings has a new offer for anyone who is new to the DraftKings Sportsbook. If you click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment, you can activate the offer. All you got to do is bet $5 on any pregame moneyline, NHL, NBA, NFL, MLB, and if your bet hits, you will receive $200 in free bets. Now, the best way to take advantage of this, since your bet has to win, is to go over to college football and take one of the big favorites in college football. This week, my advice would be to take Oregon. I believe that is a game that they are guaranteed to win. It is 99.5% chance that they are going to hit based upon the point total, what's implied to happen. So make sure you guys do go ahead and check that out. My best pick would be Oregon to turn your $5 into $200 in free bets over on DraftKings Sportsbook. Again, you have to be a new user. You have to place a pregame moneyline bet on any sport. The bet has to win, and then you receive your $200 in free bets. Make sure you guys do check that out. At number 13, we have Jonathan Taylor. But if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I do not think that Jonathan Taylor is going to end up playing on Sunday. He did not end up practicing on Thursday. He was held out of practice. I would be shocked if he plays. If he does play, he'd be ranked in this range. I'm incredibly nervous about Jonathan Taylor if he does play. But if he doesn't play, then we have number 14, Deion Jackson. Now, when Deion Jackson was the guy up against the Jaguars, the Jacksonville Jaguars, this motherfucker had 10 targets, 10 receptions, 79 receiving yards. He had 12 carries for 42 yards, a touchdown, and he was the running back number 1 in week number 6. Now, do I think he's necessarily going to do the exact same thing up against the Patriots? Fuck no, baby. I don't think that. But do I think that he could potentially finish inside the top 10 at the running back position? Definitely if he is given an ass load of touches. It would appear, if I'm Sam Ehlinger, based upon what I saw out of Deion Jackson when he was the guy with Matt Ryan, I would just dump the ball off to Deion Jackson roughly 7,000 times. So I hope that's the game plan for them. At 15, we have Donta Foreman. Now, I got a bunch of questions in the live stream last night prior to Thursday Night Football about Foreman versus Jackson. Who would I start? Now, I think Jackson is more risky, but has slightly higher upside. Foreman is safer, but I don't really see Foreman necessarily smashing against the Bengals, whereas I could see Deion Jackson somehow just going bananas up against the Patriots. Last week for Donta Foreman, RB number 5, 26 carries for 118 rushing yards, a target, no receptions, 0 receiving yards, obviously because he had no receptions, and 3 fucking touchdowns, 32 fantasy points, RB5. He's had back-to-back games with exactly 118 rushing yards. Off the top of my head right now, I do end up thinking that Chuba Hubbard is going to end up playing. I don't think it's necessarily a lock, but even if he does play, I still think Foreman's going to be the guy for the Panthers, who are looking pretty solid, even though I think the Bengals are probably going to beat the shit out of them. Now we move to tier number 5, beginning with running back number 16, Raheem, the Dream Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. Last week up against the Lions, RB 36. The team trades for Jeff Wilson Jr. How much is Jeff Wilson Jr. going to cut into Raheem Mostert's workload? I'm not sure. Obviously, they needed another running back. Chase Edmonds was absolute dog shit. They packaged Chase Edmonds and sent him with the picks to go ahead and get Bradley Chubb from the Broncos, so they had to trade for Jeff Wilson Jr. Now, this is the first week of Jeff Wilson Jr. in this offense, but this offense is kind of similar to what he's used to in San Francisco because Mike McDaniel was there in San Francisco, so I think Jeff Wilson is going to get touches, but how much, I'm not too sure. I like Raheem Mostert. I love this matchup, but I am incredibly worried about the situation that Mostert is in. At 17, we have David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears going up against the Miami Dolphins. Now, despite the fact that Khalil Herbert, who's ranked as running back number 21, is significantly better than David Montgomery, in my opinion, David Montgomery is still going to be the guy. He gets 15 carries basically every single game. He averages 3.9 yards per attempt. He's going to get a couple of targets. He'll probably finish inside the top 20. He'll probably do nothing special, but he's an incredibly safe play week in and week out. And again, despite the fact that Khalil Herbert should definitely be the guy, the Bears don't see that. It's very similar to Tony Pollard and Zeke. Tony Pollard should be the guy, but instead the team gives it to Zeke. At number 18, we have Jamal with 2A's Williams of the Detroit Lions going up against the Green Bay Packers. He was the RB number 9 last week. Again, we kind of did just touch on this with DeAndre Swift. While I do think DeAndre Swift's the more talented running back, we all know that Dan Campbell's a tricky bastard and will just give Jamal Williams a couple of carries. He'll hop on into the end zone. He scored 2 fucking touchdowns last week. He scored 2 touchdowns in a single game in week 8, in week 4, in week 3, and in week number 1. So Jamal Williams could easily outscore DeAndre Swift, so I think Jamal Williams is a relatively safe option this week, but if he doesn't crawl his way on into the end zone, he's probably going to be like running back 30. At number 19, we have Michael Carter of the New York Jets going up against the Buffalo Bills. 2 games in a row inside the top 33 at running back. He was not very successful up against the Patriots, but he saw 7 targets. They trade for James Robinson. I still think Carter is going to be considered to be the guy. They're going to have to pass a shit ton up against the Buffalo Bills, because the Bills are favored by roughly a zillion points. They're favored by, I think, 13 or 14. They have a 30 implied point total, so if the Jets want to stay in this game, they're going to have to dump the ball off to Michael Carter, throw the ball to Carter. They don't have a lot of options to throw the ball to, so I think Michael Carter will still eat in this scenario, even if they're not able to run the ball after, I'd say, the first 3 drives, because the Bills are probably going to score on the first 3 drives. At number 20, speaking of the Bills, we got Devin Singletary. Now, Devin Singletary, realistically, when you're going into the season, you would have thought Devin Singletary would be a smash, because he's on the Bills. The Bills are beating the dog piss out of these teams. The issue is that instead of just running the ball late in the game, they continue to go all gas, no break. They continue to just basically metaphorically teabag the shit out of the other team, and they throw the ball a bunch. Singletary was the RB 32 last week. I think he has upside against the Jets, but it's kind of all smushed by the fact that they like to throw the ball so much deep into games. At number 21, to close out tier number 5, we have Khalil Herbert, who has had 2 back-to-back games inside the top 17, 3 back-to-back games inside of the back-to-back-to-back games inside the top 24, and he's currently the running back 18.5 PPR. Now, again, if you look at Montgomery's numbers compared to Herbert, you would start Herbert if you were the head coach of the Bears, but he doesn't do that, which makes it incredibly difficult for me to rank Herbert higher. And the Dolphins defense has gotten a lot better against the run, so Herbert's a tier 5 back. I like him. I think he's a great player. The issue, again, though, is the team just doesn't really feed him the ball like they should. Now we move to tier number 6. Now, if Tyler Algier, I believe, will be the starting running back this week. Now, Cordero Patterson could still be activated, and if he is, then I panic about Algier and I don't start him because Patterson will be the guy. Last week, Algier was RB 13. It seems like he's the guy in Atlanta. They had a great game up against the Panthers. The Chargers' run defense is also extremely bad, so I like Algier in this spot. But again, we have to just assume that Cordero Patterson isn't playing. It is Friday. We should have some clarity later. I don't think Patterson's going to end up playing. I think he'll end up playing next week up against the Panthers. So for now, I think Algier kind of deserves a spot inside the top 24. At 23, we have CEH. This guy, at the start of the season, RB 6, 10, 17, and 8. And then just like Humpty Dumpty, he fell off a wall, RB 50, 42, and 30. Yikes. Pacheco is the starting running back on the team. I mean, he's RB 23 because the other running backs around him I don't really trust. I think this is a good matchup for Hilaire. The problem is I don't think he's going to see a crazy amount of touches. Very hard to read Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I still think he's the best running back on this team, but I don't know if Andy Reid necessarily believes that. At 24, we got Eno Benjamin. Eno Benjamin's ranking heavily hinges on if James Conner plays or not. Now, the Cardinals are notoriously bad at telling us when someone's going to play, when someone's not going to play up until Sunday. So on Sunday, we should have a pretty clear idea if Connor's going to play or not. If Connor plays, I guess I'd have to rank him ahead of Eno Benjamin, but I probably don't want to play any of them if that is the case. Now we move to tier number 7 at the running back position. This is kind of just the fact. This is not the fact. This is the tier where everything falls off the edge of the fucking earth, Christopher Columbus style. Back-to-back games inside the top 16 for Gibson. It's honestly shocking that when Brian Robinson wasn't there, this guy was struggling, and then Brian Robinson comes back, and it just lights this fire underneath Antonio Gibson's ass, and he started to play really well. I think the matchup against the Vikings defense is okay, but they're still going to use Brian Robinson, and Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson are pretty touchdown dependent. Putting both of them inside the same tier at 26, we have Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake would move up in my rankings if Gus Bus Edwards is ruled out. But right now, as I'm recording this, we don't necessarily know that. And it's always incredibly risky to start Kenyon Drake or any of these Ravens running backs because of the fact that Lamar Jackson could just sneak one in. And the fact is that Harbaugh loves just using some random-ass running back on the goal line. Like, Drake might run all the way up the field, 99 yards, fall on the 1-yard line, and then Justice Hill runs it in. It's incredibly frustrating. At 27, we have Pacheco, the number 1 running back on the team. He's yet to crack the top 20 at running back. So I don't think we should really feel super comfortable with him. At 28, we have Brian Robinson Jr. I almost said Brian Robinson III, but he's Brian Robinson Jr. Last week, RB 61. He is very touchdown dependent. If they are able to keep it close with the Vikings, then I think we could see Robinson have a decent game. If not, he's probably going to end up being a bust on the week. Running back 29, A.J. Dillon. We just talked about this with Aaron Jones. It seems like the team has finally realized that we should not fucking give the ball to A.J. Dillon so much, and we need to ride with Ron Jones. But at the same time, Mr. Matt LaFleur could just go back, or Mike LaFleur. There's 2 LaFleurs. One of them is on the Jets. The other one is the head coach of the Packers. But with that said, this dude needs to get his head out of his ass and just keep running the ball with Aaron Jones. But we all know deep down he has a love affair for A.J. Dillon. And at number 30, we have Darrell Henderson. I think I would rather just get stabbed by O.J. Simpson than start Darrell Henderson. RB 50 last week. There's a bunch of running backs in L.A. Cam Akers wants out, so Henderson's going to get touches. But I don't really trust him at this point in the season. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, goodbye. Make sure you check out the DraftKings link in the video description. Goodbye.